So you've decided you'd like to build a shed. This is kind of an instructable on how to do at least a basic shed design and build. I'll go through the tools that are needed, as well as try and promo a tool that I've developed. So first is to decide what size shed you'd like. For my project here, we're going to be doing a 12 by 8 size shed. And let's go through some of the tools you'll need. First and foremost, you'll want a shovel or pickaxe and a rake. I prefer to use a pickaxe because it lets you move large objects relatively easily, as opposed to using a shovel. It gives you a little more leverage. Then you will want definitely a measuring tape of some sort, a square, and a bubble level. The marking paint is more or less optional, so is the mallet for setting your block. You can probably just get away with using your hands if you don't want to buy a soft mallet. And then this tool here is one that I've developed just because I've done enough 16-inch layout walls that I figured a jig would be useful to help save time in layout. So the idea being that this rail here sits on your top or bottom plate, and then a stud gets slid into the left and right ends of it, and they're spaced exactly 16 inches apart on center. So I'll show you how exactly this tool gets utilized as we get further into the video. In addition, I'm using a drill driver combination and screws as opposed to using nails, simply in the event that if I decide to move, that it's possible to take this shed apart and then rebuild it later with little to no effort. As far as screws or nails, you're going to want an exterior grade, and you're going to want to use a 3-inch screw or nail. That'll about get you where you need to be. Remember, you don't want to use anything oversized or undersized. If you'd like to follow the code, go ahead and get yourself either a copy online for free, or you can buy a book. But for my purposes, a 3-inch exterior grade screw will do nicely. And personally, I do not like Phillips bit type screws. I instead opt for a hex type. The reason for the hex type drive is I've never had any difficulty with bits stripping out or not being able to drive the screw effectively, so I highly recommend making that switch. Once you've decided what size shed you'd like to build, the process will start with layout. So here I've just laid the boards roughly the footprint that it's going to take up. Obviously, once they're stood up and the shorter boards are in between the longer ones, it'll be slightly larger. But for getting started, because we're going to need to dig a couple of points to insert these CMUs in the ground to act as footers, this will at least get us started. What I'm going to do is use the marking paint to mark out the corners so that the CMUs stick slightly proud of the boards, and then we'll go and dig those, insert the CMUs, and set level. Now we'll just do the 4 corners, and then the 2 additional CMUs will get placed mid-span on the longer boards. But we'll figure out where those are positioned once the corners are set. We'll just run a string line and locate those appropriately. As far as placement and orientation, code for my area requires that I'm at least 5 foot off the property line. So that backboard there is at least 5 feet off from the back left corner. So we're slightly askew. It's not square with the back fence. It's square with the back of the garage. Now this right board is parallel to the foundation of the garage and exactly 5 foot off of the face of the foundation. That's our rough placement. Now we're going to go ahead and mark out with paint, dig the holes, set the CMU, and then we'll continue with the woodwork. Alright, once you've dug your first hole, set the CMU to about the depth that you're looking for, and you're going to use the bubble level to basically check that it's level in a couple of different orientations. Here you see it on the first diagonal, and you're looking for this middle bubble to be about in the center of those two marks. Then you'll go and you'll check the other set of corners. Check it long ways to figure out if it's tall one way or the other. That looks pretty good. And then on the short distance, you'll do the same. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now we'll go and set the second block, and then we'll do all four corners. Alright, so once you got your first two blocks set, you're going to take a look at your piece of wood, and you're going to place it crown side up. So with your long member placed on top of the two CMU, put your level about smack in the middle. You can see I'm a little bit low on the left or high on the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the right block out, we're going to dig a little deeper, reset it, and then put the wood board back and check it all again. Now your shed is going to settle a little bit because you just freshly dug those holes. So make sure to pack as much dirt underneath the CMU as possible and really give it a good tamping. But I'm pretty happy with that for the first board. Let's go do the other two corners. Alright, so I'm quite happy with how that's set up. Everything's nice and leveled. Obviously a little bit of settling will happen, but it is what it is. Alright, so now you've got all 6 of your blocks set. Everything is nice and level. You can start cutting your wood and joining the pieces appropriately. Now this is all just 2x6 Walmanized material. Again, noticing we're using exterior grade materials. Don't skimp, use the right stuff, and each board running across needs 3 screws or nails per the code, so that's what we're going to do here. So we've talked about building a 12 by 8 foot shed, and for that we've selected 3 8 by 4 foot sheets of exterior grade plywood. Now the 4 by 8 sheets of plywood actually come in at 4 by 8 foot. Now the 2 by 4 and 2 by 6 framing lumber, so right here we just have 2 by 6, it is not actually cut to length. The 12 footers that I bought and all that you find in store are typically a little bit over that dimension, anywhere from a ½ inch to an inch over. And so all of this material will need to be actually cut down so that your exterior dimensions of the framing lumber meet up with that 12 by 8 sheeting dimension. So you can see here what I'm talking about. The 8-foot board is actually slightly over dimension. Now, because we're building an 8-foot wide shed and we have 2 1½ inch rails running either side, we need to take 3 inches off of 8 feet. So the runners going across are all going to be 93 inches long. Same goes with these 12-foot boards. They're over dimension. These will get cut to exactly 12 foot. Alright, so you've cut the long 12-foot rails. You've got at least the one end piece cut. You can basically start your setup at any corner, really. What you want to do is use the square to make sure that the two pieces are roughly 90 degrees to one another. So that's roughly what your first corner will look like. Tops flush, the two sides flush, 3 screws or nails, and you're ready to do the next piece. Now I'd like to show off the first feature of this tool that I designed, which I've just been calling the Stud 16. There's an embedded magnet on one end, so you don't have to bend all the way over. You can save some stress on your back when you want to just grab a handful of screws or nails. Once you've grabbed the hardware that you need, you can place this tool on the corner that you built and then slide the next stud in. And that should get you 16" on center, which my measurements are saying that that's pretty accurate. If you're not using screws, obviously you just take your hardware and hammer it in. This tool is still in testing and development, so I'm still making some adjustments, but it's more or less set. Just the final geometry is being tested to make sure that it doesn't need to be given a little bit more dimension here or there to comply with the fact that wood is an organic material and not always exactly repeatable. It's also not lost on me that I forgot to mention that you're going to need a saw of some sort, either a hand saw, chop saw, circular saw, to cut these pieces of lumber to dimension. I just forgot that in the tool review. Like I said, this tool is still in testing. Unfortunately, one of the wings broke off because it's 3D printed and wasn't made with solid infill, just 20 to 25%. But while I have you here, so the other features that have been integrated are a ruler system. So you can see those are all inch and 1/2 inch marks, as well as integrated bubble levels, so that you can check and see if your surfaces are where you need them to be. So that's at least a rough overview of what the tool is. I'd like to take this and have it rebuilt. It does need to have about 1 millimeter added to the inside dimensions, and then have it printed with solid infill, and hopefully it'll be more durable. If I were to go to some sort of limited production run, likely we'll have this made via plastic injection molding. The last thing that you need to do is just measure your diagonals to make sure that the entire frame stayed square. So you measure from corner to corner, and ideally you get to the same measurement. So this is 173 1/8. This is 172 7/8. So it dawned on me as I was placing the plywood sheeting that I made a beginner's mistake. I was just excited to try out the tool that I'd made. So you see here what the problem is. At 4 foot, where this sheet would normally end, I'm falling short of this joist. So what I forgot to do is the first board at the corner is fine, but the second board is supposed to be 3/4 inch set closer to the edge than it is. I just went ahead and straight started using the tool that I developed. So what needs to happen is there actually needs to be a 15 and 1/4 dimension from edge to edge on those two boards, and then after that you go 16. Here you can see that I've moved the joists so that it sits half and half over the 4 foot mark. And now the plywood sits flush with the two sides on the corner and sits half over the joist. That's the other reason I like screws. So if you make a mistake, it's easy to fix. Since we're using exterior grade material, I ended up getting the correct screws to go with that. Again, star bit type or hex type, depends on who you talk to. And these are, again, self-drilling. This time I'm not going to pre-drill, I'm just going to do these straight, but they ended up being 2.5 inches. Once you've finished screwing down the deck, I've gone ahead and just covered it over with some plastic because it's going to rain the next couple days, and we're going to frame the walls inside, and then we'll just carry them out and stand them up later. Following the plans that you've either drawn or purchased, cut all of the pieces to length, and I'm going to be screwing everything together again just in case I need to disassemble or recycle anything. I did have leftover material from building the garage, so we're just resawing some of that to make the headers and whatnot for the shed. This is the front wall, and I've screwed in all the studs into the bottom plate and installed the header for the door. Now the wall's upside down right now, but I installed the top plate and the jack studs for the header. Just stood the wall up and moved it out of the way so that we can frame the rest of the wall sections. I've gone ahead and laid out the next wall, cut all the pieces to size, and done my layout. Now I'm just going to go ahead and join everything up, stand that wall up as well. Stood up the back wall, now time to do the two sides. So now with my marks drawn, I'm going to use a string line to snap the diagonal that I need to cut these pieces into. It's a really low angle, and it's not a typical angle that's cut, just because I've decided to do things a little differently. The babies are coming to check on me, make sure I'm not having any accidents. Off camera, I resawed some more lumber that I already had to make the headers, and then the 2 jack studs are also recycled. That's the 3rd wall done. The 4th wall is more or less the same as the 3rd, except there's no doors, no windows, nothing, so it's just a through wall. Same as the other wall, I've temporarily affixed the top plate, left side of the screen, just to be able to snap the line and cut the angle that I need to get the rake. I'm sure that's a fetish somewhere. Then once you've got your walls stood up and secured, you go ahead and get your plywood, and that's the next thing to be installed. So to make installation of the siding easier, just do yourself a favor and screw a temporary board into the correct height, and make sure that all of your tongue and groove are going in the same direction. And before you know it, you'll have all of your sheets stood up, and I'll do all the trimming work after the last 2 panels are installed. I gotta cut out the doors nice and square so I can recycle those for the hinged doors. But once those are installed, the last 2 sheets, the partial sheets, we'll cut all of the excess off of the installed sheets, and then the roof will get installed. So I cut the 2 additional pieces of plywood, but it has started to rain, so we'll pick this up when it gets sunny again. It's kind of like I'm playing real world Minecraft. So I went around with a Sawzall and the correct cutting blade and just very patiently cut off all the excess off the top of the plywood sheets. So everything is now more or less where it needs to be, that I can continue the roof structure and then build the doors. So off camera, I fabricated the overhang on the left side of the screen and the front fascia board out of some 2x8 scrap that I had left over. I'm trying to use up everything that I have just laying around the garage before I spend more money. These are the purlins that I'm going to install. These are just 10 footers. I've got a whole bunch of 2x4 scrap that I'm going to make up the rest of the length with. I tried to give a time lapse of me installing the purlins, but one of the chickens knocked over the camera. So here they all are, at least the first set installed. Now I need to do some more measurements and cut the tails short so that they fit the exact dimensions for the roof. And then once the purlins are installed, I can put the plastic roofing on. And there you go, rest of the purlins all installed. Using some recycled material from the garage construction. Not because I love the environment, but because I'm cheap. Took about 6.5 inches off the back end, installed the back fascia, and the last purlin there on the top. So now the board, the plastic roofing should have an overhang front and rear, just the way I like it. And here's the plastic roofing just slid into place. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. So I need to install the last bit of blocking up there, and then we're gonna get to paint everything. We're gonna use a white solid stain to paint the shed, and then I'll get up and install all the plastic roofing. I started the painting process and got this one wall finished, and the back wall about halfway painted. And that was just with 1 gallon. So I'm still doing touch-up paint. But yep, the first coat did take 3 gallons, so plan on 6 gallons being needed for a first and second coat. The painting itself could be a whole separate video, but for this project I used several 2 and 3 inch throwaway brushes from the dollar store, a 9-inch roller, 3/4 inch nap rollers because this is a rougher surface. So take a look at what that means, but the bigger the nap, the rougher the surface that you're painting. So if you're doing an interior paint, you'll go with a lower nap, exterior, rougher surface, you go with a higher nap. 3/4 inch seemed to work really well for this plywood. Other than that, some paint trays and some solo cups. A brush and paint will make you the carpenter you ain't. It's looking pretty good. So I am dry fitting all of the roof components. The strip at the top and bottom goes right up against the edge of the wood, and then the rest of the pieces lay in the middle so that you have approximately 24 inch between each one. The instructions I found for installation said to use a flathead fastener. So in this case, I'm using a self-tapping, self-drilling type flathead screw with, in this case, Phillips head. I couldn't find any that had a Torx or hex bit that were also flathead. As an alternative, you could probably use like a drywall screw or something similar. And here you can see, once it's installed, what it's kind of going to look like. It's, I like it. I think, I'm actually rather impressed with this. I wasn't sure if this would work, but, I think it will. So I've got my 2-inch overhang, at either end. I've put one ridge over the edge to act as a drip edge, and I've put in 2 of the EPDM washer screws as instructed. So there you should have a good idea of how this is getting installed. Yep, that'll probably work just fine, especially with the fact that we're going every 2 foot on center. So we'll do 2 at the end as recommended, and then we'll go every 4. Now, I'm facing south, and that is typically where our predominant wind and rain comes from. So I'm starting at the north end, and the panels will overlap as we go down towards the south. So these pieces get placed between the support pieces, to close up the ends. Make sure that there isn't a whole bunch of air just blowing in. These can be cut to length with tin snips if they need to be shorter. So learn from me. Don't get ahead of yourself. One step at a time. Alright, you can see the end closure strips are installed. My fastener pattern, like I said, the next bit will just be 3 ridges over, so every 4th. And we're installing the second panel. For overlap, you just need to have one ridge over the other. So there you go. You can see that's it. And then just line them up and keep going. Using some scrap wood, we're now going to make the 2 doors. I'm using the same 2.5-inch screws that we used to attach the plywood to everything to build this scrap frame for the door. Cool, so that worked. Now I took the extra piece of plywood that we cut out of the opening of the last sheets for the wall and just put it on top of the frame and put in 5 screws along the top and right edge to get it squared up. Now I'm going to cut off the excess and then put in the rest of the screws on the left and the bottom. Now that that's all finished, gotta install the hinges, which I'm going to install the top hinge, bottom edge 12 inches from the top, and then the bottom hinge will be installed with the top edge 12 inches from the bottom. Then install some closure hardware, and there you go. One door done. Same process as before to do the second door, and my partner suggested that I put in some back latches, which makes a lot of sense, so that when you open the door that there's no swinging going on anymore. It just stays held open, which makes too much sense. She got that from her experience working with horses at barns. And for safety, add a piece of twine that you hang on the inside of the door so you can get out if you accidentally lock yourself in. I added a division to about the halfway point of the shed to make a new space for all the chickens, and installed some roosting bars. They're about 5 feet long on 2 levels. That should be enough for the 8 birds. And then the litter right now is about 5-6 inches deep, and just use some scrap boards to kind of fill in so that I can just toss more in as needed. But 5 or 6 inches for now should be plenty. I lined the bottom with Tyvek, again more leftovers, and that'll act as just kind of both vapor barrier and a catch for any liquids. Max's Zoo. More real-world Minecraft. That's more or less the shed complete. I just got to do some finished painting on the other door and add some trim. But now we're going to build the enclosure for the chickens. Mostly to the rush of the need for this space, I entirely forgot to film putting up the run. So this is it already standing, but the construction process is more or less the same as the shed. Just these studs are flat and 2 foot on center instead of 16 inch. Same pitch back and forth, so the roof will get continued over this whole area so they can still be outside even when it's raining. Then this material is just getting stained like cedar tone, just to give it a little bit of contrast. I'm still working on staining, but it's going really well, and the birds seem to really be enjoying the new space. Hopefully there'll be less chicken poop in the yard. So like the shed, once you've got the rafters installed, install the rest of the purlins, the strips for the plastic roofing, and then the plastic roofing itself. And yeah, shed is finished stained and first coat paint. So now I've just got to do a second coat of paint, install some trim, and finish it out for the final look. But this is more or less the shed complete. We've got lots of happy birds. We got a dust bath now. We move their food and water outside. So now we'll also need to install some hog wire around the outside, just to make sure that nothing digs underneath.